Hello Spectrumites and welcome to Autism Actually. I'm happy to be here with Laura Mundy from Laura Mundy Dog Training for part one of our Assistance Dogs Q&A, and I'm the proud owner and founder of Autism Actually. And thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So just a bit about Laura. She's a positive dog trainer who helps mentor pet dogs, companion dogs and therapy dogs. She's also a Minddog assessor and trainer, and she's been working as a dog trainer and handler in Victoria for about 15 years in a variety of roles and settings. And she has undergraduate and postgraduate psychology studies and is currently doing a PhD in therapy dogs. So lots of qualifications there. And so I thought to kick off the session, just a bit about terminology, because I see this come up a lot in discussions online and in person. Could you just clarify the difference between companion dogs, therapy dogs and assistance dogs for us?
So I guess with companion dogs, it's not a really clearly defined term. I find most of the people tend to describe companion dogs more as probably well-trained pet dogs that they have in the home, but maybe they have a mental health or physical health concern and that pet helps alleviate some of those symptoms in the home, but they don't necessarily have public access. So they're not like an assistance dog that actually goes out in public with them, but they might find having that pet around the house actually helps improve their functioning in some way. I guess with therapy dogs, they can have a variety of different roles too. So quite often your therapy dogs might be handled by like volunteers that go into, say, hospitals or schools or some kind of inpatient facility settings, things like that. And they're well-trained dogs that an organisation might assess, and then they just volunteer to go out and do visitation kind of stuff. So they might go out and just visit people in a hospital and just sort of petting and hanging out with that dog seems to help the patients feel good or something like that. Therapy dogs can also be used by professionals, so maybe like OT, social workers, psychiatrists, physios, things like that, where they might actually use the dog in more goal-directed ways as well. So I guess, say, an example like with a physio might be, say, if someone's recovering from surgery and on their hand and they are trying to build up their strength, but they might be experiencing pain. We've found that having a dog around can actually reduce pain for people. So they might find that they could like throw a ball to the dog and do more of their physical activities and not feel as much pain when they're doing it and just be more engaged in the therapy as well with a dog there. So that's kind of more goal directed by a professional as opposed to more like your visitation type stuff. Assistance dogs are very different. So assistance dogs are where a dog just works for one person and that person might have like a mental health issue or a physical health issue, and that dog is trained to alleviate symptoms and improve functioning for that person. And probably the biggest thing that discriminates in assistance dogs from therapy dogs is that public access factor. So they're able to go out in a jacket and go into public, like into restaurants, cafes, movies, things like that with that person. That dog just works for that one person. They don't go out and sort of interact with lots of people.
The main difference then from what I hear is that therapy dogs are for multiple people, whereas assistance dogs are trained to help one particular person. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you for that. I think it's just a really important thing to clarify terminology, especially in the areas of public access rights and things, especially when making a decision on whether to get a companion dog or therapy dog or an assistance dog. So thank you for clarifying that.
I think with, just touching on like the companion dog and the assistance dog, I think they are probably what I see overlap quite a bit out in the community. So especially in the autism area, I get a lot of parents call me saying they're looking at getting either a companion dog or an assistance dog. And those roles probably still are more primarily for the one person. They differ more around the public access. So an assistance dog is to be able to go out with them to access the community, whereas a companion dog's more around the house and they're not too bothered about whether they can put a jacket on and go out in public. Whereas the therapy dogs, where it differs, therapy is more for other people. So the handler's including their dog to bring benefit to multiple people in the community, whereas the companion assistance is more for that one person.
Thank you so much. The first kind of official question that we got from our community is about what exactly do autism assistance dogs do? Is it about comforting and calming the autistic person, or is there more to it?
I see a lot of variety in the families with children with autism, or even sort of adults with autism that are looking at including a dog in their home or using them as an assistance dog. When we're certifying an assistance dog, they have to be able to do 3 tasks to alleviate symptoms of disability, to sort of qualify as an assistance dog, but there's always huge numbers of tasks that the dog actually does. And for every person, it's so different. And I guess every person I work with autism, their experience of autism varies a lot as well. I guess probably some of the key things that I see is just access into the community. So a lot of feedback I get is the dog just helps them feel normal. So being able to go out and just involve themselves in the community and normal everyday activities with friends and things helps them feel more like just what they would describe as normal. A huge one is being a barrier. So providing like a physical barrier when they feel uncomfortable when people are around them. So if they're lining up in shops or something like that, having a dog between them and the person behind them helps them reduce their anxiety, provides a bit of a physical barrier. Sleep onset is probably another big one. So helping them get off to sleep and touch and feeling them on them is really beneficial. And emotion regulation issues. So if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed sensorily, just that touch with the dog can really help de-escalate arousal and reduce stress a lot for them.
So essentially, making the world as large, like majorly stressful environments, more accessible to people on the spectrum that might have a variety of sensory issues or emotional regulation issues and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's definitely very similar to what Benson has already done with me, even though he's not qualified yet. Most of the things you said tick the box for me as well. He knows that I like deep pressure, for example, and just intuitively knows that when I go to sleep, he sits at the end of my bed on my feet. So it's amazing what dogs do intuitively without us even really training them at all to do it.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really great point around the difference with dogs that might be brought up in the home and are already a pet before they're certified as an assistance dog, as opposed to ones that have got later on what we probably class as pre-trained. A lot of the tasks that the dogs do for their humans just organically happen through that bond and that relationship. And a lot of owners will say to me, what tasks do I need to train them to do? But when we actually sit down and just kind of talk it through together, we notice that the dog's already doing it. So like you're saying with Benson, he's kind of already doing a lot of things for you, but you might not necessarily have actively trained it.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think sometimes, I knew when I first looked into assistance dogs, I didn't know much about it. I was like, I don't know if I have enough specific things I want the dog to do to qualify to get an assistance dog. But had I known that earlier, maybe the process would have been sped up for me. So it's a great thing for families to know that it doesn't necessarily have to be something major. It could be small, subtle things. So thank you for that. I got another question, which was, what can Benson do with me and where can he go when he's a qualified assistance dog? This is probably something that we could both answer. It kind of comes under that public access rights, doesn't it? Once
you've done your public access test and you're qualified as being able to go out in public, you can basically go anywhere legally. So you can go into restaurants, shops, cafes, things like that. There's very few places that you can't go into. Places like commercial kitchens or operating theatres, things like that are the few places that you can't. But yeah, you can really go anywhere. So it can be a little bit challenging for some teams. Some places unfortunately don't recognise that legally you're allowed to go into public, and it can be a little bit stressful if you get pulled up and questions about whether you're able to go in, and that is sort of something that some teams do get confronted with and can find challenging. But legally you are able to go anywhere.
I guess also another thing that I would like to raise, Minddog, just as an example, is the organisation I'm going with Benson, and they have this rule about workplaces. So you have to undergo a workplace assessment, and that kind of comes in the realm of animal welfare. Could you talk a bit about why it's important that dogs don't have long hours as service dogs?
That's why I like Minddog so much and why I chose to work with them as an assessor. So I've worked with a number of different organisations in the past, but I love that real focus on welfare that Minddog take. So even when you're a trainee, in that first 12 months before you do your public access test, we don't recommend that people take their dogs into workplaces, schools, universities, things like that. We want to wait until they've done their public access test, because we know they've had a good 12 months of training and the dog's probably more ready to be able to cope with going in and working longer hours, which is what the person's going to be doing in their place of study or work. I guess the reason is we want dogs to also be able to be just dogs. So if they're working all day and then they might be working for their handler in the evening and overnight as well, that's a lot of work for a dog. We don't want them working 24 hours because that's really exhausting. And especially if a person's going through a hard time or they might be unwell, it's going to create a lot of stress for the dog as well, working for them. So we don't want to see a dog being pushed to work for really, really long periods. They need to be able to have a rest as well because it's really exhausting, just like it is for humans.
I think that brings up a good point. Sometimes they just need time to be a dog and do normal doggy things. I think when you talked about the fact that not all people are aware of the Disability Discrimination Act and public access rights, and the fact that some of them might not be on board with it, you can imagine how that would be stressful for the dog as well if people aren't fully understanding what assistance dogs are supposed to do. So I agree that lots of breaks are needed.
I think still there's sort of that stigma in the public that an assistance dog looks like a yellow or a black lab as a guide dog, or a person's in a wheelchair, and that's kind of how it looks as an image to the public. But nowadays, with the progression of more psychiatric assistance dogs, we've got everything from Pomeranians to Bernese Mountain Dogs to Rottweilers to everything. So I think to the public it's a little bit more confronting to that stigma or that image that they have in their mind of what it looks like. There can be a few more questions asked, which is challenging for people out there, unfortunately. But especially
for those with mental health issues or people on the spectrum, being confronted like that would be very stressful, I would imagine.
Yeah, and feeling like they're being questioned, like they have to sort of justify why they're out in public with a dog, and that's not something we want to see our teams do, but we do our best to prepare them and help them before they're out there doing it, so that we know that they're best equipped with the tools to kind of address that in the way that's going to be least distressing for them as possible.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. So the next question I have is about how does one go about applying and obtaining an autism assistance dog, and is the actual process difficult?
Yeah, so good question. I guess it depends on the organisation you go through. So obviously I'm going to be coming at it from a Minddog perspective because that's who I work for. But there are a number of organisations out there. So there's some organisations where you apply and you buy a pre-trained dog that's already a couple of years old and tested, and you might pay $30,000 to get this dog. With Minddog though, it's different in that they're already your pet dog. So similar to Benson, you've already got him, you're doing some training with him, you're bonding, and then they go through the application process with Minddog. So how it works with Minddog is that as long as your dog's over 6 months and desexed, you can apply to go into the process with Minddog. And then we send out a home assessment so that we can just see how the dog is around the home, and that there's no red flags that there's going to be any issues. And then you go into the training and accreditation process. So it's quite different with your more owner trained with the support of a trainer Minddog process than it is with your pre-trained dog under different organisations. Yeah.
And I personally love that it will be different for every person. I understand that, some people may want it pre-trained for various reasons, but I love the fact that it's very bond and connection focused, and that it really focuses on the dog getting to know you and you getting to know the dog. And I think that's what attracted me to the program in the first place, that we were kind of directly involved in the training and seeing how it works and things like that. So yeah, it's very good to know some of the options out there.
I personally like the Minddog way of doing it because, like you said, you touched on really important keywords like bond and relationship. And I think that's where Minddog kind of surpassed the other models, because everything's based on the bond and the relationship and getting to know each other throughout that process. So it's more relational based than skills, kind of cues and command based as some of the other methods are.
The next question is targeted to me actually, and saying, why did I get a dog? Well, for me that's a pretty obvious question because I'm just a big animal lover. I think I went for a few years without having animals in my life, and I really struggled mentally as a result. I think the great thing about animals is that they give you unconditional love, friendship and companionship, especially if you're already ostracised socially or you might not have access to social outlets. It can be a great way to come home and just see a happy face and recharge and things like that. And for me personally, I find it easier being around animals than humans, and I know that some other people on the spectrum also find a more easier rapport with animals than humans. But yeah, that's basically it. I just love animals, so that's a pretty easy question to answer. Then the next one is, are there particular breeds of dogs that are better suited to being autism assistance dogs?
I've had some clients that have come to me before actually obtaining a dog, with the interest of getting a dog, and when they've got autism, and some of them have ended up getting greyhounds, and I've actually found that the greyhounds have been amazing for them. And I guess probably just because the greys are very calm and relaxed and chilled, and they don't necessarily have as much intense high energy behaviour, and for some people on the spectrum that can be beneficial for them. But I probably tend to get them to describe to me first what they're looking for in a dog and how they think a dog can help them, and then I can kind of match my experiences with breeds and personalities against what they're looking for. So there's no real direct formula for it. I think it really depends on what they're looking for in the nature of a dog. If they're wanting someone that can be more relaxed and calm and gentle and tactile and lay there with a heavy weight against their legs, then that's probably going to be, a heavier dog might be better than a tiny little light dog. If they want a dog to be able to go out and run with, then they're probably not a big giant breed that's got 5 minutes of energy before they pass out is going to be beneficial. So if you've got a young growing family, maybe not a dog that's going to be too jumpy or energetic. So it really depends on the family and their needs and what they're looking for, and that's a great thing. It can be any different breed. We just need to match it right. So
what I hear from that, it's a very individual process, and it's not just the breed that matters, it's also the personality of the dog and how much it will match to the family in question. Yeah, exactly. And even within breeds, there's a huge variety. So it might not even necessarily be the breed, but just that personality. You always get exceptions.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yeah.
A common question, and the one that we've been asked, is how do I fund for an assistance dog in training? Because this is an obvious barrier a lot in the autistic community.
Well, I think NDIS has helped a lot. So a lot of the teams that I work with do have funding, either through NDIS or sometimes through other just community-based funding, so like case managers under an organisation, and they've got funding for training under that. So it's actually been pretty accessible lately, which has been fantastic. I guess it's a matter of maybe even approaching different organisations that you get funding through first and just saying, is funding available for something like this for me to be able to train an assistance dog to help me. And there are some codes and things under the NDIS that are available to help people get training and support.
And again, it kind of comes into that previous discussion that we had about the fact that there will be some pathways that are less expensive than others. So for example, getting a Minddog would probably, be less expensive over time than getting a pre-trained dog.
Depends on which avenue you go through. I guess with the Minddog process, you've got the training costs. So with Minddog, we ask that you get at least 50% of your training done with a professional trainer, and then the rest is you can kind of do yourself. So there is quite a few training costs there in hiring a professional trainer to help support you, but you don't have the upfront costs of getting a pre-trained assistance dog. But under those, a lot of the organisations that do the pre-trained assistance dogs also have the option of just a companion dog for in the home, and they're a cheaper option than the fully trained assistance dog. So there is kind of a bit of variation in what some of those organisations offer. The upfront money is really challenging for a lot of people to be able to access the pre-trained dogs. Coming up with $30,000 isn't easy.
No, it's not, especially if we're already part of a, disadvantaged financial environment. So it's a very important topic to be raised, and having some places that we can go to for support and knowing the pathways is really helpful.
Yeah, and Minddog do, even with the application process and the retesting each year, a lot of their fees are subsidised for people that are unemployed or on a concession. And if they're homeless, it's free. So it's great that they're even doing that, to be able to sort of make it a little bit more accessible for people. And some of the trainers will do it cheaper. If people can't access funding, we might do it cheaper for people that are training up an assistance dog. But I sort of try and get out there and advocate as much as I can for my teams and chat to caseworkers and organisations that support them and go, how can we get some money for this person to be able to train their assistance dog?
Well, it's fabulous that you're such a good advocate in our community. It's really, we need more people like you. I'll just have one more question before we finish up part one. This is quite a good one. I like this question. It's, why do we use positive reinforcement? For me, it's quite obvious. It just works. So that's why I use it.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, which is a great one. And I think people kind of underestimate how effective positive reinforcement training can be outcomes-wise, behaviourally. But I guess from an assistance dog perspective, what I love about it gets back to that relationship and bond that we talked about before. So I guess if you've kind of got anyone trying to teach you something and they're coming at you from really top-down punitive approach of anything you try you might get in trouble for, doesn't really kind of make for a very motivated or engaged learner on the other end of the lead. So if you're really trying to motivate your dog and you're paying them well and they feel like if they give things a go, there's going to be something really pleasant for them as an outcome, you just see a dog that's a lot happier. We do find that dogs are more open to displaying what we call novel behaviours. So they offer more behaviours if they've got more of a history of positive reinforcement. Whereas if we're telling our dogs off a lot, they tend to try and suppress their behaviour in the fear that something bad's going to happen to them.
And it's all about going at the dog's pace, isn't it? It's, helping them learn effectively in a non-forceful, non-pressured environment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if dogs are trained more aversively, you do see dogs that are showing a lot more stress and they're just like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. There is risk of fallout of some, behaviours of dogs trying, even becoming reactive or aggressive to avoid things. That's more on the extreme kind of side of things if people use really frequent, really harsh punishment. But I think just the more positive reinforcement you use, the more positive relationship people have with their dogs. The dogs are more willing to learn, they're more engaged, they're offering more behaviour, and it's just a lot better for the bond. And I do find really nicely that the teams, because they have such a beautiful relationship with their dog, they want to interact with them in a positive way.
And I've found myself, even as a human, I've actually enjoyed the process because before I did the clicker training, I did more the balance type corrective training, and I used to dread having to do training with my dog because she was very oppositional with me and didn't want to do it, and neither did I. Whereas now with Benson, I've only had him for a couple of months, the progress I've seen is incredible, and I look forward to coming out, and as soon as he sees the clicker, he wags his tail. It's just amazing what it does. Yeah,
you touched on a really great point. I think with your previous dog where we're using more balanced techniques, you were seeing that opposition from her, like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to engage in this process because it's not fun. But now you're seeing a really engaged learner in Benson. He's like, sees that clicker and the food come out, like, great, what are we going to do? This is going to be fun, it's going to be playful, and play is hugely therapeutic for both as well. So if we play and stuff in training, I think it's really positive for the dog and the person.
That's the thing, we should enjoy the process and not feel like we have an obligation to do it, both the human and the dog. That concludes part one of our Q&A on autism assistance dogs. I just want to thank you, Laura, so much for joining us. And where can people find you if they want to get into contact with you or find out more information about what you do?
So I've got a website, so it's just lauramundydogtraining.com.au, Facebook page as well. So they can definitely check me out on Facebook and send private messages that way. They're probably the two best ways to get in touch. And obviously I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about anything in this area because it's something I absolutely love. And I think it's important that people are out there getting the right information and feeling supported. So I'm definitely happy to help if I can.
Absolutely. And if you have a chance, you post some really great videos on Facebook, which have a lot of good resources and information and insight on what you do with your own dog, Bennett, and things like that. So if you have time, I definitely recommend checking out Laura's Facebook page if you want to learn more about what she does. And thank you everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to leave feedback below in the comments section. And we would appreciate if you enjoyed the video to like and subscribe to see more videos like this. And to help support our work and fund more videos like this, you can head over to our Patreon page and you gain more benefits like early access and priority over questions and things. So I'll see you next time and look forward to part 2. Bye.